Thank you for watching here on YouTube Live at Blooming Light. We're going to talk about gaslighting tactics, okay? We're going to talk about gaslighting tactics. If you are not familiar with me, if you happen to be logging on live, okay, thank you for being here. Otherwise, just check the description box. You can also go to the homepage here. You'll get tons of information, tons of videos, over 2,000 videos I have here on my YouTube platform with a mixture of other people's content as well as my own. And the gist of what you need to know is that I am a survivor of narcissistic abuse, as is my son, okay? But we are moving from surviving to thriving. Most of the abuse that we have encountered, for the most part, has been covert, and it has been communal, spiritual, religious, narcissistic abuse, okay? People, abuse of power, abuse of authority, abuse of positions, titles, resources. We have definitely been targeted in terms of destiny swapping, satanic ritual abuse, you name it, evil eye, jealousy, identity theft. Me and my son have endured that, okay? And so a part of my journey, I'm not just a reader, I'm not just a Reiki master. I am someone that bridges several different modalities, okay? So on the journey, of course, I have sought mental health assistance over the years regarding all of the various things that I've experienced. And as a result, over the last 8 years, I've learned quite a bit about narcissism, quite a bit about personality disorders, the more pervasive and insidious forms of it, and how it manifests as abuse and what it causes the survivors, okay? And most of us are not taught any of this stuff, okay? We're not, we're just not. And then even when we're taught it, oftentimes it's something that we're just looking at like factoids and bits and pieces of information, right? You got a theory, you have a book, you have a bullet list, right? But in terms of how this stuff is lived out and what it really looks like, see, that's the meat and potatoes. That's where you get to how to look at what to expect, right? How it plays out. Because you're not going to have a book. You know, you're going through life. We're not going to have Dr. Romney in our back pocket. We're not going to have, you know what I'm saying, or any of the other greats, okay? We're not going to have any of that as a list like, okay, this hoe is sitting here grinning with her whole ass, knowing that she a whore. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not going to have nothing. We're not going to have nothing that's going to be that we can just go, you know, let me go in my pocket real quick. The hoe is gaslighting. This bitch is lying. They sitting here smiling. You know what I'm saying? They playing dumb. Book and compute. No, that's what makes this stuff insidious. And that's what makes it a little bit, you know, frustrating for the survivors as they navigate. Because unfortunately, the world as we know it is kind of dumb, okay? And it's kind of ran by this 3D template. So if you can't, that's the challenge of the law, the legal system. These are all the challenges which works in these retards' favor, okay? So what's gonna help the survivor is to identify and how to know so you ain't going bonkers. Because gaslighting is designed for just that. Question your reality. For you to question, am I tripping? Am I tripping? No. The whores are gaslighting, okay? The niggas, whores, and when I say niggas, okay, I'm not talking about, that's just my slang. That's my urban slang for, you know, referencing men and women, okay? No, they trying to confuse you. They know full well what the fuck is going on. So Dr. Ramani is talking about here one of the tactics, okay? And there are many, okay? There are many, I promise you there are many. But one of them is silence. So I haven't even gotten into her share yet. Here it says gaslit by silence, okay? One of them is silence. So this is why I'm going to add this. I don't know if she is going to point out this, but I'm going to add it. This is why, in my opinion, enablers are just as bad as them. Yep. Because most of the enablers, they think that they are getting off on a technicality. And what do I mean by that? They'll hold their hands up. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I don't have nothing to do with that. I didn't do that. I did not take that action. I did not participate. I'm not in agreement. I'm not in approval of it. And so they'll do one of those moves like this, right? However, the enabler is the enabler because these are the individuals who, if they're not the co-signers or the investors, these are the ones who know about it, okay? They know about it. They have the facts, they have the proof, they have the truth, they know. But their way is saying, I'm not getting myself involved. Now, as it pertains to the targeted individuals, if there's any relation and connection to the targeted individual, okay, this is a form of gaslighting, and it's still a betrayal, because if they have relation to the targeted individuals, they are the ones that are playing dumb. Relations meaning if they know the person, if they have some kind of a connection to the person in any way, shape, form, or fashion, whether that be by blood relation, a friend, a partner, a coworker, whatever the case may be, a boss, a manager, whatever the case may be. If there's any kind of connection and they remain silent, they are withholding information that would be useful to the targeted individual. And so with their silence, that's gaslighting, because the targeted individual, chances are they already know that the particular person, group, or organization, boss, co-worker, relative, friend, whoever it is, they may know that they know, right? And so, in other words, so anytime and every time that they would engage with the targeted individual in relations to, like I said, if it's a coworker, if it's a boss, if it's a friend, if it's a family member, and they're remaining silent about that information, that's gaslighting. Let's talk about it.
Gaslighting that we don't talk about enough. We often think gaslighting is active. It's the things that people say and do, telling us that we're wrong, telling us that we're crazy, telling us we're too emotional, telling us that things didn't happen, moving things around, manipulating the environment. And it often is, and it can be. But to only view it that way misses one of the most lethal forms of gaslighting, which is when people say or do nothing, or what we can call gaslighting by silence. Now, this is most classically experienced when people go through a trauma, especially in childhood, and the child is not protected, or worse yet, the child says something about harm that was done to them and nothing is done.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, the gaslighting may be the suggestion that the trauma couldn't have happened,
mm-hmm.
or the child is exaggerating,
mm-hmm.
or that the child shouldn't say such things. But after that,
mm-hmm.
Even the child did this most courageous thing, then it's silence, nothing is said. And the child is now living in a world not just of fear and loss of trust and all the other fallout of trauma. They were not protected. And everyone around them is now saying and doing nothing. The silence, frankly, is the most abusive thing that can happen. It's an absolute negation of the child's experience. Now, we can put this in adulthood. A person has something bad to them. They take it to whatever authority they take it to. Law enforcement, a court system, human resource department, and nothing is done, nothing is said. This can happen in a relationship where people around you may witness the cruelties that are happening in your relationship. And nothing is done, and nothing is said. This happens on historical and sociological levels. Human rights crises, genocides, oppressive governments. Nothing is done, nothing is said. Obviously, the nothing being done and nothing being said is a trauma and a re-trauma, but it is also gaslighting. It's a denial of experience that literally leaves the other person feeling insane. Now remember what the core of gaslighting is. It's a denial of experience, a denial of perception, of memory, and then it's the fostering the sense that there is something wrong with the person being gaslighted, and a repetition of this cycle until we doubt ourselves. Someone not acknowledging what is happening is a denial of experience. Someone leaving you to twist in the wind when you are clearly struggling without noticing you or protecting you or responding to you or empathizing you or reaching out to you or helping you leaves us feeling as though we're the problem, we're misreading the situation, and then allows us to keep feeling as though we're the problem. That ultimately culminates in us feeling absolutely crazy and doubting everything about ourselves and our lives. Folks, that's gaslighting and that's emotional abuse.
That is.
When silent gaslighting...
Let me pause. I want to pause right there. Okay? I've said this, but I'm going to reiterate it. And I love that it's coming from a professional, because that's another kind of go-to that individuals use to try to discredit those who do not have the accreditation. So I'm glad it's coming out of her mouth. Now, she said, gaslighting, silencing, denial of, her words is, this is a form of abuse. I also like that she mentioned this could be in business. She said HR, governments, she went across the board, relationships, everything like that. So again, this is why I talk about it. When I talk about dysfunctional family structures, when they are silent, that's gaslighting. She also pointed out that that's also another form of trauma, because the denial of what somebody has experienced, nothing is said and nothing is done, okay, it's creating another trauma. It's also creating trust issues. It's creating, all of those things, because essentially when someone reaches out to do something and the answer is nothing, that is a denial. And then she said that there's an undercurrent of the projection of they must be the problem. That's an abuse. That's what she said. In every arena. And in my opinion, this happens, on the personal level. We know why this happens in like family structures and relationships, but it doesn't make it any less what it is. This is why all of these people have to be dealt with accordingly. Their loyalties to the abuser is what's costing the people who opted to be silent about knowing what was happening. People often say, you wonder why children often won't come forward, because on some level, they know this. Nobody's going to believe them. It's going to be said that they were exaggerating, or that they imagined something, or that they just have mental illness. and nothing's going to be done. And in some cases, it gets worse because they had the audacity to try to find help. They had the audacity to try to speak about it. And so then these people or these children then learn, like, it's better to not say anything at all because there's nobody that's going to do anything. And they're left to have to live with their abuser or their caretaker or whoever the authority figure is. Now, as an adult, the same difference. When people try to step up and communicate, and this is what they're met with. So if they go to a manager, you know, a landlord, or, you know what I'm saying, a government official, police, law, HR, a boss, you know, when people attempt to initiate that and nothing is done, nothing is done. It's a denial, right? It's funny how the world says, you know, most of us hear this in about every area of our lives every single day. It's all about communication, don't we? It's all about, you hear self-help gurus and life coaches and preachers and teachers and all arenas. You hear it's all about communication. I'm starting to believe that that's designed to give people with a lot of secrets, people who are control freaks, people who are, you know, power hungry, people who have, you know, ill will and hidden dishonor, okay? I believe that it's designed just to keep them abreast about what you're thinking, what you're planning, how much you know, how much you don't know, so that they can then strategize accordingly. Not so much for, you know, just and fair and balanced, healthy conflict resolution or healthy resolve to a potential serious issue. It's so that they can know how to move around. If there's things that, what do they need to cover up? What evidence do they need to get rid of? What strategy do they need to implement to kind of negate or calls into question what you're saying in a particular area, versus sincerely and authentically looking into something, okay? That term, communication, for those in that category, it's for that reason. Communication being everything, it's for that reason specifically, okay? So they can know what they need to plan, so that they can know what spell they need to be casting for those that are into the nefarious weirdo shit, okay? So they can know what do they need to be casting on, what areas do they need to be concentrating on for their spell work. In terms of manipulation, what stories they need to be coming up with, what do they need to move around and create so that it can look like what they need it to look like, okay? In terms of evidence, well, so that they can know what they need to start getting rid of if it's possible. In terms of trying to get alibis so that they can implant certain types of alibis, whether that is a character alibi, whatever it is. You see that? See, when you're dealing with covert style of abuse, this is where communication has not helped the survivor. It has not helped the target, okay? It's used against the target. The target speaks out about something, and then they're made to look crazy because of how they feel or what they say or what they do thereafter. This is another form of abuse, okay? And the world needs to know it, and we need to hear more examples of that, okay? Case in point, like I said, if you're in a family structure, you start going to people and you start telling them things about what's happening and they deny it. You start going to people and say, hey, you know, this person stole something. Do you know anything about it? This person, you know, took a gift, an inheritance, something. Do you know anything about it? And if they know and they tell you no, that's abuse. Most of us come from such toxic backgrounds that we don't see it that way. You hear me? I'm serious. I just saw 211 resources. Most of us come from such toxic backgrounds that we don't even see it that way. Because again, some of us come from scarcity mindset backgrounds. And so scarcity mindset backgrounds is then you're willing to have a scapegoat and a targeted individual and deny reality in the name of a resource. They want that resource, if there was something left to you, and the group at large wants to benefit off of that resource, then they will deny the reality, gaslighting, by silence. Deny the reality because of their scarcity mindset. They want the resource, right? So when people like kind of try to roll their necks, the outsiders and the onlookers about, you know, well, they should have, because everybody always have a list of opinions. Well, they should have went to this one, and they should have went to that one, and they should have, you know, asked this one and asked that one, and they should have said this and that, and they should have attempted to communicate. You need to educate yourself a little bit deeper. Chances are most survivors do that, and this is what Dr. Ramani is talking about. And at some point, you know, especially when you know that there's other sectors or people in an environment, a family circle, and they have certain like loyalties and, you know what I'm saying, control. When you know that people are under certain control, you know that you're not going to get anything out of this person. This person is weak-backed. This person is under a spell. This person's too codependent on that person. There's no way. They're too codependent. Their livelihood is somehow tied to them. Okay? This person is scared of them. You know, they're bullied by them. They're not gonna say anything. Right? And so, again, this is why the targeted individuals then start to say, okay, I'm not asking any further questions. Because I do give people opportunity. Collective give people the opportunity. And every single time they only prove what they are. Okay? Which are liars, cowards. Okay? Two-faced backstabbers. That wants to play like they're concerned and like they care, but withholding the information is a form of gaslighting, and it is abuse. And as I said, most of our cultures, especially the African American culture, but I'll go as far as to say it's in every culture, okay? But I can really only speak on my personal culture, and from what I gather, this is the standard and the norm. And the only ones who suffer the most from that is the targeted individual. And this is another reason why it makes it challenging, okay? The culture, they don't see it that way. They don't see withholding as an abuse. You see that? They don't see not telling somebody in their own family structure, yes, they did take your money. Yes, they did. They are stalking you. Yes, they did, and they did, and they do cast spells on you. Yes, they did take some insurance or put insurance or a policy on you. And yes, they just look at it as I'm minding my business. That's when conveniently, all of a sudden, the people who are meddlesome and always in everybody's shit, but that is when it's convenient. I'm now minding my own business all of a sudden. Now I'm minding my business. Now I don't want to get myself involved. You're involved the moment you allow yourself to be in an environment and knowing somebody doing something nefarious to somebody and not standing up to those individuals and or not saying something, whether that's alerting the authorities and or the person. Okay? So again, hopefully this starts to provoke a lot of people in the universe out there to reevaluate their lives and their family structure and their relationships. Okay? And usually what happens is this comes to surface once other people start getting karma. Okay? Whatever the reason, the human nature, for the most part, when we're in that scarcity template, it don't matter to you until it affects you. It doesn't matter to you at all until it personally affects you in a bad enough way to where now you want to understand something a little bit deeper. But prior to that, it is a total denial of reality. Okay?
Happens. We may find ourselves getting more dysregulated. Perhaps we're the ones now raising our voices, saying things like, how can nobody
Exactly.
not see what is going on
Exactly.
here? Like, what is wrong with you?
What is wrong?
Etc.,
Exactly.
etc. And if that
Exactly.
happens, the system then doubles down, looking at us sideways as though we are unhinged.
Yes.
And the silent gaslighting then multiplies itself within ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A sort of simple but not particularly harmful example of this occurred for me years ago when a terrible thing had happened in the city where I was living that had affected everyone. I was a student at the time, and the university was even closed for a few days. And I mean, we were studying psychology, for heaven's sake. And I remember that the terrible thing happened, the city was still reeling. And I remember the teacher just coming into the classroom and saying, okay, so let's just pick up with the reading from last week. And I remember thinking, what the hell? There was no checking in to see if people were okay, or if people's families were okay, or maybe saying, maybe we should talk about what's happening. It was as though nothing happened. She just started in. And I remember looking around at other faces in the room, and mercifully, a couple of other people did have their eyes wide open and had strange expressions on their faces that left me knowing that I wasn't the only one who found this odd. But had those faces, had no one else in that room, because some people didn't have a change in expression, I literally felt like I'd lost my mind. I wondered, well, maybe what happened wasn't that big a deal. It actually was, and it changed the city I lived in rather permanent ways. But I was left feeling off by that experience. That's what
Right.
gaslighting does.
Right.
But when nothing is said, she didn't really say anything. It can almost be harder to register it. However, always remember, when it comes to silent gaslighting, just one person taking note, even changing expression, validating us, or bearing witness is all we often need to feel a little more sane. When we are struggling or going through something, and especially if anyone is aware and then nobody says anything, even though the people around us may not be the direct causers of the pain, but rather maybe enablers or people who
She did
just
mention
want to keep
enablers.
the status quo.
Yes. Yep.
We do. We feel like we're out of our minds. Because
She
the first
mentioned
thing
it.
we do is wonder, it must be me. Because
And that's
nobody is noticing
but
or
it's-
saying
let me
anything
pause
or
right there.
addressing it. It's all about the
Exactly. I know she's going to go here, but that's exactly what I'm saying. That's the point. If enough people can remain silent enough, long enough, then surely you will have to question, maybe it is me. But not only that, hopefully it can convince the rest of the world, maybe it is them. One of the reasons why, in terms of people who have, tried to unaliven collective, stolen things, plotted, intruded on their human civil rights. You know, one of the things is, well, if we can damage control that, this is a part of why they end up blackmailing and bullying and bribing a lot of individuals. Because if we can get rid of any trace and evidence of it, squelch it, hide it in some kind of way long enough, then we can convince the world that it's not so. But also the targeted individual, that hopefully they will end up psychologically collapsing or freaking out because they know something is real and they know something is true, and they have all of these conspirators trying to trick them differently, that they'll just go insane, end up spinning out, end up in an institution, end up flipping out, end up, like she said, the reactive, so that they can feed the narrative of what they're actually trying to convince everyone. And that is the goal of gaslighting. That's the point. This is why I'm gonna go to a smaller scale. Let's reduce it to more individual and personal and small, okay? Romantic relationships. You want to talk about, you want to know why, you know, collective gets to the phase, and I'm very grateful and proud of collectives that do get to the healing phase where they get their closures and they are able to move on, closures without acknowledgments and apologies, and they do the work and they stand on their business and they stand on a boundary. It's important because it's not about not believing in humanity. It's not about not believing that people can change and everybody makes mistakes and everybody deserves a second chance and no one's perfect. And it's not about that. Most of what the collective have gone through is endless situations where, in some cases, in romantic situations, they've given people more than one chance. They've gone round for round, and in most cases without even people fully acknowledging their behavior. And at some point, what ends up happening is people are so proud. They're so proud, so they can't, their pride and their ego, that narc in them, or if they're not narc, whatever you want to identify it as, okay, whatever floats your boat, won't allow them to honor and acknowledge the experience. So for an example, if there's a reason the relationship came to an end in the romantic situation, because we're reducing it to that, right? The individuals who are on the side of the violation here, right? Their inability to face that is a part of why they can no longer have contact with the collective. That is not mentally, psychologically, physically, or emotionally healthy or even fair. We're not taught any of that. We're taught about struggle, love, and being endlessly forgiving for people who can't even honor, acknowledge, and be held accountable for what they've done. So they want to be able to access you again and again without even honoring what they did to begin with as to why they ever lost access. That's not healthy living. And unfortunately, a lot of our cultures have been brainwashed and toxic so long, we think it's normal. On top of that, it's not healthy. It calls into question if the individual has healed, grown, or evolved. Because if they had, being accountable to what happened is a part of that growth. The fact that they want to come in without any of that implies that they are possibly still on that same BS. They're possibly coming in to finish the job. They're possibly coming in because they're bored. They're possibly coming in because they're lonely. They're possibly coming in because, whoever, they had their nose up their ass at this time has ghosted them. They're coming in because they're, ego wounded and they need a licking and a bandaging up. They're coming in to get energy. Not really coming in to have healthy reciprocity. Not even really coming in to honor. And ways we learn to identify it is when stuff happens in a relationship that was not right. The way the individuals handle that determines, gives us the necessary red flag. Okay? So again, it's sometimes about the silence.
Sorry for interrupting, Mom. What time do we need to get the sword up?
I'll let you know when I'm done, okay?
First things first, arcade first, then the store.
Okay, I'll let you.
Keep cooperating for the arcade. And then save the mission of data. Not save the mission of data. None of that, Mom.
Okay, so pay attention to that. And for those who feel like collective and the targeted individuals look like they're sneaky or they're hiding something or they're up to something and all of those things, you know what? It's fascinating how the world gets overly vested in that. Meanwhile, the collective don't know anything about all these people who feel so entitled to know everything about them. In other words, we don't know what their deal is. We don't know where they live. We don't know the ins and outs of their personal life. We don't know what, right? What their habits are and, all of those things. But they end up feeling so entitled to know it about us. And the collective do start to move that way because once you discover that people aren't on the up and up and a lot of people are operating by silence, then we realize that, okay, you need to move in caution because you don't know who or how far something goes. So it's not about trying to have anything that's, the collective is not up to no good. The collective is preservation. Who's involved with this weird stuff that I'm experiencing? How far deep does this go? Right? And for some of us as content creators, we're unlike the famous people like from Hollywood or things like that. We don't have, high level bodyguards and all of this stuff trailing us around as we just go outside and do this and that. Okay? So we're, some of us become unofficially famous and without all the perks. So we have to become our own, what do they call that for the White House? I forget what it's called. Anyway, secrets, I don't know, agent, I don't know. But essentially we have to start moving in a certain way because we have to become that for ourselves. Okay? Because we don't know how deep the weirdos are going. Because people become obsessed. They see you and then they feel entitled to know about you. And they start, looking at everything about you if they can get that information. Okay? On top of, again, I've already talked about this. Our divine birthright to be safe and secure trumps anyone's incessant entitlement to have all of the details about our lives. Who we're in a relationship with, if we're in a relationship, where do we live, who do we live with, where do we work? You know, all of those things are things that those who have hidden agendas want to know for their nefarious reasons. And on the other side of it is some stuff that people don't have no business knowing anyway. We don't know theirs. You see that? So if you're an onlooker and you know you don't know anything about what's going on, or you don't have any information, well, just know that some stuff you don't know. And if you're not brave, if you know any of the parties involved in some of this stuff and you're not brave enough to step to the collective, then you have to accept your lot, that you're not bold and courageous enough to say the things that you need to say. Okay? Because coming towards the collective without coming with the information in which you do have, it's not going to work. The collective is going to shut down. We're not giving free information to people who are withholding information. Okay? So if you got questions, you need to come in saying what you know, and then the collective will then give you their side of things. Okay? That's how that's going to work. Otherwise, chances are you're an enabler, and you'll see how this is going to end up working for you down the road. Okay? Okay. So now let's go ahead and wrap this up. Hold on. So I'm going to end this one because it's been 42 minutes. I'm going to end this live. I will make sure that it's public so y'all can check it out. I hope it's okay. I am not attempting to monetize Dr. Ramani. We're not in collaboration. All of her information is accredited to her, please. And thank you. Okay, this is for informational purposes. It is not an attempt to diagnose. You know, we're not responsible. Everybody needs to be responsible for their own lives. You take information and you research it, you study it, your due diligence, and apply with wisdom. Okay? I love Dr. Ramani, mad respect for that lady. So I am not attempting to pass as her. I'm not attempting to make it seem like we're a partner or in collaboration. She don't know I exist. Okay? I promise you. She don't know I exist. But I have respect for her, and information that was presented by Dr. Ramani in this video is to be accredited to Dr. Ramani. Thank you.